their introduction in 2015, the Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs, have been embraced by almost all major companies. However, even frontrunner companies struggle to align their core operations with the SDGs.
In day 2 of the conference, we addressed the question how companies can translate their intentions into concrete action. What keeps companies from implementing the SDGs, from walking the talk? How to operationalize the leave no one behind principle. Leaders from companies, government and teaching institutes will address these topics in their keynotes.
In the panel discussions and breakouts, we will further discuss these topics. For example, what is the role of training and teaching?
The methods, the frameworks, the models, the theories we bring into the classroom significantly influence the way they come to think of the world and the way they come to make decisions.
We will discuss what business schools are doing to train and teach current and future leaders.
Furthermore, we will delve into the transition challenges companies face. We will showcase an innovative tool that helps companies to assess and address the gap between intention and realization. This is the Better Business Scan.
The third topic is the role of metrics in measuring progress on the SDGs. More specifically, we look at how living wage can become the worldwide standard. Join the second day because it's our shared responsibility to leave no one behind.
Am I in the screen? I hope so. Yes, I see the message. Thank you very much. Welcome back again to the second day of our conference. Yesterday, we had a solid keynote presentation and vivid discussion around the systems challenges that the world faces and the role that needs to be played by companies and business schools. Maybe you can switch the slide, please. It was clear, no, go back, please. And then get out of the slides, please. Then in full screen. Thank you. You can see already that Mette Morsing is here. We also have other members of the keynote speakers available in the backstage, but so we're a little bit off track here. But nevertheless, it was clear that to act in a responsive manner and what is sometimes called in line with society is not enough anymore. Corporations should take the lead and can take the lead in many areas of systemic change. Keynote speakers yesterday, Peter Bakker of the World Business Council for Sustainable Development and Jeffrey Sachs of Columbia University made it clear companies don't have to wait for regulation or stakeholder pressure. This requires a changed mindset. It's called also regenerative strategies and different approaches to metrics. The panelists yesterday reiterated this message time and again, and the breakout sessions even showed that it is feasible to develop a principled, collaborative approach that also focuses on more complex challenges like, for instance, how to manage a nexus of SDGs. Business schools have gotten an assignment by all presenters yesterday to help the Decade of Action with timely teaching and research on corporate strategies. Train and identify agents of change. So today we take the next step. We look at the operational challenge, walking the talk. What about dilemmas and greenwashing allegations of companies? How to overcome complacency or cherry picking of the SDGs? How to make sure that no one is left behind? Today we organize this together with the Club de Madrid and the Wage Indicator Foundations and many other organizations. Maybe finally, on an organizational note, we have been welcoming many participants from all around the world. Over 1,000 participants are registered at the moment, of which 1/4 are students and 3/4 are professionals. 40% come from Europe, 10% from Northern America, but we also welcome people from 74 different countries like Tanzania or the Democratic Republic of Congo, Mali, Iran, Afghanistan, Kazakhstan, Malaysia, Peru, Colombia, the Philippines, well, more than 74 countries in total. So again, welcome to you all. Let me shortly explain the sequence of the day. Now maybe slide 2 might be presented now, please. So we have keynotes on walking the talk from business, government, and education. We have a big panel implementing business models from comparable origins. And we will have very topical breakouts with lots of change agents represented. Today, Booth, at the end of our sessions, will also cover most of the features that will be discussed and most of the launches also that have been introduced today. But now let me introduce to you the first keynote speaker. So maybe go out of the slide, please. Yes. So the first keynote speaker is Robert Metzke. Robert, I consider to be the mastermind behind Philips' innovative global health strategy. And Philips is aiming at combining SDG 3, 12, and 13, and is really committed to walk the talk by the year 2025. And he probably will explain it in much more detail in his keynote speech. So Robert, my question to you would be, what dilemmas do you face in walking the talk? I give the floor to you.
Thanks so much for the great, it's a big pleasure for me to be here. And yeah, talking about systems change, I think we are living in the season, if not the century of systems change, right? It's imminent. Systems and our socioeconomic systems are changing all the time. Business is thriving in that environment, but then able to do so, we need to understand the boundary conditions indeed. And I'm grateful for having the opportunity to share some thoughts on how we make that relevant and operational in the company. Maybe if you look at the first slide, Caroline, looking at the world that we are in, if you just take 10 steps back, then you see here the different countries with on the x-axis you see the Human Development Index, so how well do people live. On the y-axis you see the natural resources that are consumed per capita in these countries to maintain that standard of living. A couple of things jump to the eye. So first of all, you see a strong correlation between human development and resource use currently. But secondly, more importantly, there are these little dotted gray lines vertically and horizontally that denote high human development index and the one planet that we have. So you see that all countries where people have a high human development currently use a multiple of the resource that we actually have. Of the 100 gigatons raw material that we delved as mankind last year, less than 10% have been recycled, tendency declining. I think you're all aware of that. But the third insight from the picture is also the dynamics behind this, with huge countries like India and China moving up. We break the trend. So it's really important to find a way to help people live their lives within the carrying capacity of the one planet. That's an innovation dilemma. And when I say innovation, I mean more than technology. It's also really about the way how we do business, thinking about what the role of business is in society. And coming back to Rob's introductory notes, also being aware of the responsibilities that companies have to contribute positively to societal change and to drive the environmental footprint that society currently has. That having said, we took, when we developed our approach at Philips, to understand what's, and to avoid greenwashing, you really need to understand what are the material topics for a company like Philips. So when we start talking about adding the sugar to food, then it's not relevant because we do not bring any food on the market. So if a tobacco company starts about small-scale farming, that might be nice, but not to the big damage that happens from causing by tobacco products. So really understanding what the material topics are, what the intentions of the stakeholders are, is important. So for us, the three topics that we can influence and where we have a major impact is on the social side, building accessible and sustainable healthcare systems, and on the environmental side, so on the vertical axis, it's about decarbonizing healthcare and moving to circular, which is basically climate action and creating more value with less waste, so circular economy. Having said that, once this is understood, I think the next step of operationalizing such a big topic is to set strategic targets, not just for the short term, but also for the long term. So with the perspective towards 2030, in the decade of delivery, we have put a non-financial metric in our purpose statement. We said we want to improve the lives of 2.5 billion people by 2030. And in the middle of the road towards 2025, we have set very specific on the social and on the environmental side to really drive change in line with this picture that you see here. So if you go to the next slide, Caroline, then you see what the Phillips agenda looks like. 25 in line with the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations. It's about the real topics that I talked about, making healthcare accessible and driving circular economy and climate action. We have said we want to specifically also make healthcare million people in underserved communities, which is an enormous task that can only be done in partnerships. And secondly, we really want to further scale our experience that we have with circular economy to expand to all professionals put into the markets, drive 100% eco design for all our new products, and have committed science-based targets in line with 1.5 degrees global warming scenario, which also is end-to-end, including our more than 10,000 suppliers, all operations, and of course the use phase, which means also indeed helping to decarbonize healthcare globally, working with hospitals, care providers, to really lower the tremendous impact that we see in the health industry these days. Having said that, let me give you a couple of examples because I only have 10 minutes to inspire you. Next slide. So when we talk about making healthcare accessible, that is a typical example of driving systems change. We will talk a lot more about this today on the second day of the conference also. But we have been in Africa more than 80 years. We have been tried a lot also in terms of building recognized products, trying to really make products that are extremely affordable. One of the insights from us is that you need to drive systems change, and you need to do it together. So you need to empower local care providers, local governments, local authorities, NGOs to build resilient healthcare systems. Technology is a part of it, but it's not all of it. You also need to train health workers, you need to build reimbursement systems, and so forth. To that extent, you see a couple of examples here where we have built, for instance, mobile intensive care units for India. We are working on new business models and financing solutions in Kenya. You see an example about collaborations in the Makueni County in Kenya as well. We have set up a digital connected care coalition where we do architect change in local communities to show that we can find together. There's a lot happening. Technology is an important part of it, but you need all the players on the table, and you need to have a common, joint, long-term agenda. Another example on the environmental side, on the next slide, where you really need to drive systems change, Caroline, next slide, please, is the circular economy. Now, of course, we know that to reach the carbon reduction target we have globally, you also need to move to circular models urgently. I said less than 10% of the raw materials is currently being recycled. With the projected economic growth going forwards, we would need 3 to 4, which we simply do not have. So circular is much more than recycling. It's really also about designing in a way that allows parts recovery, refurbishment, moving to service business models. And first of all, also really think about dematerialization. So everything that can be done digitally these days with does not need to mean to ship huge amounts of equipment. There's a lot happening here. We are massively driving that scale with the commitment to make 25% of our revenues by 2025. So that's in 5 years from now, from circular business models, products, and solutions. Task starts with design, really involves a lot of partners to deliver business models, working with suppliers, and so forth. So driving systems change, great example. Circular economy is all about driving systems change. Maybe the last example that I wanted to share with you on the climate side. As I said, we are being carbon neutral since the end of the 2020. We have our own wind farms. We source 100% of our electricity globally from renewable sources. But that's, of course, only the beginning. So a lot of the emissions also are in our supply chains. So teaming up again with our global suppliers to empower the mid to science-based targets is the next big step. And with innovation and strategy is important for us so that we really find ways of, if you think about systems change, hospitals are extremely polluting. On average, they emit 2.5 times more emissions than any industrial other ever. Actually, the entire industry emitting more carbon than the shipping or the industries, which is paradoxical for an industry based on the quote to quote Hippocrates, to do no harm, right? So there's a huge shift that needs to happen to decarbonize healthcare, and again, that requires systemic thinking. If you can keep people out of hospitals, if you can streamline patient pathways, if you can help hospitals to drive better clinical outcomes and avoid readmissions, we will be able to also reduce the environmental footprint of the healthcare providers have today. So I think these 3 examples I just wanted to share with you in terms of talking about systems change. Next slide. I said it times and again, this only can be done by working together. The public sector is very important in providing the guardrails, the playing fields, and articulating and formalizing also the rules that are needed for these systemic change, for these transitions. The private sector has huge, not just opportunity, but also, I would say, obligation and a strategic incentive to drive these changes, embrace these changes, and take a leadership role. And here we have non-profit agencies in, let's say, Greenpeace, the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, many think tanks, and not only galvanize the thinking, push the boundaries, but also keep people honest and drive change in their different ways and manners. So these collaborations, and we are actively looking for opportunities to seek the dialogue and work together, action-oriented, for instance, in PACE, the platform to accelerate circular economy, which we have set up together with the World Economic Forum and the World Resource Institute. Maybe let me talk of what's next and then wrap up. I see Rob coming back. Next slide, Caroline. If I want to trigger you going forward, I think we have a decade of integrated reporting behind us and get a lot of positive comments about the highest level of assurance. But the real interesting thing, of course, if you want to drive a car, you do not want to look into the back mirror. You want to look through the front screen. So we need to move from integrated reporting to integrated decision-making. What you see here is a first draft of our purpose compass, which is a means of enabling our decision makers also to take holistic decisions and look in advance. For instance, when you think about portfolio management or investment decisions, what the impact on all stakeholders is, views about value creation. With that, actually, I wanted to wrap up. Maybe next slide, Caroline. Yeah. So we are recognized for that, but as I said, it's only the beginning of the journey. Last slide, Caroline. Wanted to close with a quote from my fellow countrymen. If you have the privilege to know, you have the duty to act. I think that is very characteristic for this time. We have a lot of people that do know, people that actually should feel the duty to act and drive this change. Thanks, Rob.
Thank you, Robert. As the audience might have seen already, we're struggling a little bit with the presentations and the slides, but thanks, Robert. I think it was a very concise presentation. And I think we can share your slides also with the audience if required. Sure. Now, I want to announce the next presenter, who is the former Prime Minister of Finland. And please stay with us, Robert, also, because the next presenters don't have slides, so we can still involve you if there is still some time left. Esko Aho, who's still struggling with getting the video on, but nevertheless, he's there. I know that. Yeah, he's the former Prime Minister of Finland, and he is also very important because he was the person who guided Finland into the European Union. But maybe most important also for today, he's also been a VP for Nokia, and as I learned from a colleague of mine at the moment, very much into a project called New Generations of Public-Private Collaboration, in connection with the hydrogen and economy. So in that sense, we are really looking forward to your presentation, Prime Minister Aho, and I hope you can, in any case, share your sound with us.
Yeah, I hope so. Can you hear me? Can you hear me now?
We can hear you, yes.
Okay, that's perfect. I'm sorry you cannot see my face, but I'm that old that maybe it's not necessary to see me. Better to listen to me only. Thank you so much for inviting me to join this conference. I will take 3 topics on my agenda. I'm going to speak about why companies are not moving ahead fast enough. I'm trying to explain what are the logic of that. Secondly, I will speak few words about what governments can do, especially about business and government collaboration. And third element in my presentation will be leadership requirement. I think we have been putting too little attention to leadership requirements. We are expecting that when we have a good idea and ideas, that's fine, and then ideas are running ahead. I think it's very important to understand that without strong leadership, we are not able to achieve targets we have set. But first, why companies are not doing what we expect them to do? For the first, there is a lot of linear thinking in business, like in governments as well. I was board member of an electricity company or energy company, Fortum, which is one of the biggest Northern European energy companies a few years ago, 10, 15 years ago. And during that period of time, we discussed several times, what is the future of wind power? And the conclusion was always roughly the same. 10 years ago, it was the same, saying that it's a nice idea. You can do something, but it's not going to play any major role in our energy system. It's going to be marginal. It's nice idea, but it's going to be marginal. And then you need a lot of public subsidies, public sector subsidies, in order to get that work. That was the linear mindset. But as we have seen now, in today's Europe and in today's United States as well, wind power is the most efficient and cheapest method to produce electricity. And capacities constructed, for example, here in Finland, are huge. We are speaking about 15 megawatts entities, and when you are constructing 100 of them in an area, you can imagine what kind of impact it will have. If I remember correct, in our country, 2023, 16% of electricity will be produced by windmills. And if you said that 10 years ago, the answer had been, you are dreaming. This is not going to be any realistic option. And this is because of linear thinking. We have seen disruption to take place in the wind power, like in solar as well. And I assume, that's my estimation, that we are going to see the next disruption in the energy sector when combining wind power and solar power with hydrogen, and maybe in the next phase, hydrogen with CO2 as well. And that is going to change the whole energy sector design in the future. But before that, we have to disrupt existing businesses as well, and that is sometimes very difficult because companies have made their investments. One reason why they are not moving ahead fast enough is the fact that they don't want to cannibalize existing businesses. We have seen several cases in the world where business opportunities have been lost only because of the fact that companies have not been ready to do that. Secondly, about what governments can do, I think this game we are now facing is not traditional industrial game. This is going to be more and more an ecosystem game. It's not enough that we have several good elements to promote sustainable business development, but we have to have a comprehensive understanding what to do in different sectors in order to get maximum out of this opportunity. I will only go through briefly what kind of elements, in my opinion, are the most relevant ones. For the first, access to best technologies. And that is a challenge for many companies because they don't have resources to be in this vertical development. But horizontalization of technologies requires certain capacity to understand the most developed technologies, and access to those technologies is very critical. That's why every single country and every single company has to invest in R&D in a way that this capacity will be there. Secondly, we need a new type of skills and talents. You asked what is the role of business schools in the future. I think we need a new type of business development and business education as well. Multidisciplinary talents are the most critical required in the future. How to get people who are highly educated, not only to understand technologies or business models, but to have also social skills. Even humanities are important to be covered in today's world. That is issue number 2. Number 3 is risk-taking capacity. We Europeans, we believe that we can change the world without taking major risks. But to be honest, innovation without a risk is not going to happen. You can imitate without major risks. And sometimes imitation is a nice method to get things to be done. But if you want to disrupt, that means that you have to take risks. And it's not only a question of money, but it's a question of mindset as well. European mindset is quite often hesitant to take risks. Then for the 4th, we need new type of public-private collaboration. Or actually, I'd like to use Singaporean abbreviation. PPP in Singapore means public, private, and people. Consumers and users of public services are very critical component in changing the business environment. And I think we need all these 3 components, and we have to understand what is the division of labor between all these 3. And unfortunately, politicians, I'm a former politician, but politicians want to do everything. They want to interfere in everything. I think it's very important that division of labor is very clear. And I like very much Michael Porter's idea of shared value thinking, where division of labor is very clear. Governments are taking care of, let's say, societal environment and business environment, and real business is done by companies. Then we need, for the 5th, we need smart regulation. Americans are afraid of regulation. They don't fully understand that sometimes regulation can play a positive role as well. I'm coming from Nokia. I spent 4 years in the Nokia's management team. If you look at what happened with Nokia in the 1990s, you cannot understand that miracle that happened without understanding the role of GSM standard, adopted and approved in Copenhagen 1987. That regulatory effort, smart regulatory effort, had a huge impact in mobile technologies in Europe. And finally, I want to say a few words about leadership, because one key element in that ecosystem is also conceptual leadership. I've seen in companies leadership styles when CEO of the company want to get every single detail in the company to work in a perfect way. And that is mission impossible. I don't believe that in today's world, any leader has capacity to do that. You have to be able to give conceptual ideas. If you ask why Steve Jobs made fantastic work and why Apple in his leadership got that kind of fantastic results. I think he was perfect conceptual leader. He didn't invent that much, but he was able to innovate. He was able to put together things in a fantastic way. And secondly, quite often we believe that planning is still working. Politicians in Europe want to plan. Strategic leaders in companies quite often want to plan the future. And if things are getting linear way, planning is fine. It's not a problem. But who is able to plan disruptions? And it's not only a problem in governments, but you remember for sure the Club of Rome. Early 1970s, the Club of Rome made fantastic analysis what's going on in the global economy and how we have to change our mindset when oil and resources are concerned. They expected that Chinese and Indians will never be able to join the modern telecommunication network, global telecommunication network. Do you know why? Because of lack of copper. They expected that there is not enough copper to get billions of Indians and Chinese to be integrated into the telecommunication network. But disruption took place. And within 30 years, 1 billion people, more than 1 billion people were connected. And today, 7 billion people are connected into the global network. That was disruption. And no one was able to plan that. And the same with wind power. No one was able to plan the role of wind power today. That's why disruptions cannot be planned. They are conceptual. They're based on conceptual mindset, conceptual leadership. And that's why also this multidisciplinary approach is so important. And finally, finally,
please.
Yeah. When you look at leaders, both in business and politics, what is missing? Patience. Every single business leader has to look at quarterly results or annual results. A couple of years perspective is a long perspective for business leaders. And the same in politics. Always elections are coming and you have to prepare for the next elections. You don't have long-term perspective. But if you want to change, to make radical changes in the economy, you have to have patience. And democracies need more patience. That's my last message. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister Aho. I think let's move to Mette Morsing, who is going to plug into this screen also. But maybe Robert, in the meantime, because I think disruptive mindset, different mindset, all different types of leadership. I think that was the profile for Philips anyway, isn't it?
It resonates strongly, Esko Aho. Very much appreciate the things that you have been saying. What triggered me, for instance, also when you spoke about in the beginning about electricity and renewable electricity was the concept of grid parity. So being able to anticipate economic breakthroughs, disruptions, and then massively embark on them, visualize them conceptually from a leadership perspective, and then mobilize resources to hit that point. We saw grid parity maybe 10, 15 years ago, and now renewable electricity is much cheaper than fossil energy if you take total cost of ownership. But what is the equivalent of grid parity for the other we are facing? Like, is there something like grid parity to make healthcare affordable in Africa? Right? And if so, can we prove it, and can we get the big pension funds behind it to start investing now in digital platforms to accelerate that point? So a lot of food for inspirational words. Thank you for that.
Thank you, Robert. Let's, without further ado, we have still 10 minutes left, Mette. So it's great to have you here also. Mette Morsing is the lead of the PRIME network, the Principles for Responsible Management Education, organizing more than 800 business schools around the world, part of the UN Global Compact Network. So I think what you just presented, like mindset training and everything else, that should be something that you have no problem with. Maybe you can give your take on all the previous comments.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Rob, for this wonderful invitation. I'm absolutely honored to be here today on this fantastic conference and to be part of the important agenda that you are setting again out of Rotterdam School of Management. So thank you very much for inviting me. And it has indeed been a pleasure to listen to Esko and Rob and the very inspirational words and presentations about things and ideas that are very close to my mind and to my heart. And I indeed appreciate the sort of emphasis on innovation, the concern about the linear thinking, the need to integrate humanities in leadership education, and also the question Esko is raising about disruption. How can we cannot plan it? It happens, but we can try perhaps to prepare for it. And for me, coming here with a little bit of a different take than Robert and Esko is, how do we engage leadership education actually in business walking the talk? How do we engage our management schools, our universities in preparing those next generation, future leaders in actually addressing and being competent to innovate, to have circular thinking as part of the mindset that they engage in businesses with? So after all, we are, and I'm very proud to lead Prime with the 860 business schools and universities around the world that are actually trying to do exactly that. And how do we actually do that on a daily basis? Because business leaders are undeniably one of the most important agents to create a sustainable, positive development for the world. And I think it's fair to say that in the wake of a global pandemic, rising inequalities and environmental disasters, it has become increasingly clear that leaders with a holistic skill set are in scarce supply. So these wicked problems that we are facing, there is no predefined method that exists to solve these transnational challenges. And the call for novel, innovative solution, and we could say sort of minds-on, hands-on skills are critically in demand. And that's exactly what Esko and Robert have been emphasizing here. But despite this demand for leaders driven by social purpose and specifically innovative business leaders with consideration for global societal betterment, it has also become clear that we are not, as business schools and leadership education institutions, we are not fast enough and qualitatively not actually developing enough leaders to do exactly that. So the critique of business schools have been that business schools still focus on developing student skills in a spirit that has been described as generating a kind of a me-first attitude amongst our students. And some of our colleagues have even analyzed a kind of a strategic warfare rhetoric that permeates the curriculum. Just think about take over, conquer, attack my market position, win the battle, fight for a market share. This language is very sort of warfare driven. And at the same time, we're asking for collaboration, for cooperation, for partnerships. There's something here that is not really aligned. And according to Howard Professor Kurana, he's sort of saying that leadership schools have failed in educating managers, enough managers in support of societal betterment, because we have prioritized an instrumental approach, reducing future managers to what he calls mere craftsmen with limited skill sets, and where the definition of corporate success means maximum short-term economic profit for the company and the best possible salary for the manager, by the way, short-term. So summa summarum, business school students are not sufficiently educated to practice the demand that businesses are asking us to do. So what to do about that? That's sort of the analysis you could say that is shared by a lot of us, and that's the journey we are out there to help do something about. And I want to focus on three things here, and Rob, I'm very aware of the time here. I will focus on three things, key things, and I will not, because I don't have the time, go into depth with them. But please remember these three things.
We are going to tape everything, so don't worry. We will keep it for the rest of the decade.
Okay, I'm very happy about that. First of all, we need to redefine what success means. Second, we need to develop and have pedagogies redefined in the classroom. We need to have education count as much as research in our promotional tenure track professorial system. And thirdly, we need to think much more about how research impacts society. So success, pedagogies, and research impact for society are my three sort of comments here. So just a few words on that. The success, with redefinition of success, what I mean here is that we need to, you remember all the stakeholder model that we have, adored for many, many years since 1984. And you also remember where Ed Freeman was publishing his famous book about the stakeholder model. The corporation is in the center of that model. We need to have the society in the center of that model, and corporations is one of the stakeholders influencing, engaging with, and hopefully serving that society. So we need to rethink what success looks like for a business and looks like for the individual leader that we are training. We need to put that into our ranking systems, etc. also. With respect to the pedagogies, businesses asking for innovative and creative leaders with a holistic mindset. We need to think about how do we sort of support that amongst our youth, amongst our students. We need, of course, continuously to focus on advancing the cognitive skills amongst our students, but maybe we should also think about the social, perhaps even the emotional skills we talk a lot about, and I hear a lot of deans, I talk to a lot of deans these days, and I hear a new language amongst deans talking about empathy, having the ability to put yourself in the shoes of the other, whoever that other is, in order to be a smart and a clever leader in the world. You need to see the perspective from the other side in order to be successful. So we need to have education much more to the fore at our schools. We need to value education much more than what we have done. Thirdly, the research and the impact. When I talk to some of my colleagues, or maybe I'll say some years ago, maybe if I still do today, and I ask them, what's your impact of your research? Oh, they would say, oh, you just look at my Google Scholar citation. That's my impact. The more people who cite you, the better impact of your research. Of course, that's one way of accounting for your research impact, but it's a very, very narrow one. We need to have other narratives about how our research influences, or how our research impacts, or even how the potential impact, or impact potential, as we call it, of our research. We need to think that research I'm engaging in right here, how would I like that to address wicked problems and to help the world progress in small or larger ways, in short or in long term. So these are the three challenges, and that's what we're working on amongst a lot of other things in Prime. Thank you very much, Rob.
Thanks, Mette. Mette will come back also in the breakout further on in the afternoon when talking about teaching. But maybe I'm really challenging myself also here, because we still have 1 minute left, or even not, in order to go to the next stage. But I think she put in 3 challenges also for the business schools. Now, I really want Esko Aho and Robert Metzke to respond to this. Do you subscribe to this ambition, and are you going to support the business schools also take up that challenge? Maybe Esko Aho, can you be the first, and then I ask Robert to be the last? Short answer, please. If you're still there.
Sorry. Yeah, all right, now it works. So yeah. I fully agree. We need this multidisciplinary approach. And then one thing what I think is still today missing in the business school education, and that is capacity to understand similarities and differences between private and public decision making. And you have to educate business leaders to understand also what is the role of public sector decision making, how governments works, because otherwise it's very difficult to create real collaboration between these two.
Thank you. That is something that I can also wholeheartedly support. When we do a lot of research on partnership between governments and companies and civil society organizations, it is actually more understand each other than how to collaborate, which is the first step to take. Robert, final words for you.
Fully agree and fully support. I think future leaders need to have a humanistic perspective able to think in systems, and they need to have a clear impact orientation. So if that is what you can help students and practitioners also to gain at business schools, you will also be able to differentiate as a business school to help develop these future leaders that are so much needed.
Thank you, Robert. I have to wrap up this great presentation also. As I said already at the start, this is not the end of the conversation. Actually, it's the start of the conversation. I'm really happy with the sort of an agenda put out for us. So let's see whether I can now involve the panel.